I stood in my custom Vera Wang gown, the microphone cold in my trembling hand. 200 guests stared in dead silence. My mother-in-law had just ambushed me with a contract demanding 51% of my life's work. I looked at my fiancé, took a breath, and said, "Wedding cancelled." To understand why I burned my own fairy tale wedding to the ground, you have to understand exactly what I was protecting. I am my father's daughter. My dad, Martin, was a brilliant, hardworking software engineer who spent 20 years grinding away in a cramped cubicle for a massive tech conglomerate. He had a dream of launching his own cybersecurity firm, a company that actually prioritized user safety over corporate greed. But before he could get the funding, pancreatic cancer took him from us. I was 22, freshly graduated, and completely devastated. On his deathbed, holding his frail hand, I made him a promise. I told him I would build the company he never could. I would take his blueprint and make it real. For 7 years, I didn't sleep. I survived on cheap coffee, sheer grief, and a burning desire to make my father proud. I poured every ounce of my soul into building Aegis Guardian, my cybersecurity startup. I started in my tiny apartment, coding until my fingers cramped, pitching to venture capitalists who laughed me out of the room because I was a young woman in a male-dominated industry. But I didn't quit. By the time I turned 29, Aegis Guardian had secured major government contracts and was valued at just over $30 million. I had done it. I was a CEO, a founder, and most importantly, I had kept my promise to my dad. That was the year I met Spencer. Spencer was a commercial architect. He was charming, aggressively handsome, and seemed completely unintimidated by my success. On our first date, he listened intently as I talked about encryption algorithms and firewall protocols. He didn't try to talk over me. He didn't try to diminish my accomplishments. He held my hand across the table and told me he found my ambition intoxicating. I fell for him, hard and fast. For the first time since my dad died, I felt a sense of peace. I felt like I had found a true partner, but I hadn't properly factored in his mother. Cynthia was a textbook matriarch of a new money family that desperately tried to act like old money. Her husband had made a fortune in commercial real estate, and Cynthia treated their wealth as a personality trait. She was polished, intimidating, and possessed a quiet, venomous condescension that could cut glass. I still remember the first time Spencer took me to his parents' sprawling estate in Connecticut to meet her. I brought a vintage bottle of Bordeaux as a gift. Cynthia took it with a tight, painted smile, handed it to the housekeeper, and immediately looked me up and down. "So, Hannah," Cynthia purred over a painfully stiff dinner, "Spencer tells me you work in computers? IT support?" "I'm the founder and CEO of a cybersecurity firm, Cynthia," I replied politely, keeping my tone light. "A CEO? How cute," she chuckled, swirling her wine. "It's so trendy these days for young girls to give themselves these big titles for their little internet projects. But when you and Spencer settle down, I assume you'll sell it? Or let one of the men in charge take over?" "Spencer's career is very demanding, and he'll need a wife who is present, not playing boss." I felt my jaw tighten. I looked at Spencer, expecting him to jump in and defend me, to correct her on the scale of my little internet project. Instead, he just laughed nervously and took a bite of his steak. "Mom, Hannah works really hard," Spencer offered weakly. "I'm sure she does, sweetheart," Cynthia replied, patting his hand. "But family comes first." That should have been my first red flag. The second red flag was a banner the size of a billboard, but I was too blinded by the engagement ring Spencer slipped onto my finger a year later to see it clearly. The moment we announced our engagement, Cynthia went into full hostile takeover mode. She didn't want to just help plan the wedding, she wanted to produce it like a Broadway show starring her family. I was a busy woman. I was finalizing a massive merger defense for a client, so initially, I let her handle some of the venue scouting, but it quickly spiraled out of control. She began referring to the wedding as the society event of the season. She tripled the guest list, adding hundreds of business associates of her husband, people Spencer and I had never even met. When I told her we needed to pull back, that I wanted an intimate ceremony, she looked at me with cold, dead eyes. "Hannah, dear," she said, sipping her mimosa in the bridal boutique where she had hijacked my dress appointment. "This wedding isn't just about you, it's about the family brand. Of course, If your little company can't afford the lifestyle Spencer is accustomed to, my husband and I are happy to foot the bill. But if we pay, we make the rules. I can easily afford it, Cynthia, I snapped, my patience finally wearing thin. I will be paying for the wedding entirely. But Spencer and I will be making the decisions. Her eyes flashed with genuine fury for a fraction of a second before the polite mask slipped back on. We'll see, she whispered. I thought I had won that battle. I had drawn a boundary, and I assumed the war was over. I had no idea that Cynthia wasn't stepping down. She was just changing her strategy. If she couldn't control the wedding, she was going to control the marriage. And her weapon of choice was my father's legacy. 6 weeks before the wedding, the topic of a prenuptial agreement came up. I was actually the one who initiated it. As a CEO with a board of directors, investors, and over 200 employees relying on me, a prenup wasn't just a smart move, it was a legal necessity. I needed to ensure that Aegis Guardian remained insulated from any personal marital fallouts. I sat down with Spencer in our kitchen one Sunday morning, sliding a cup of coffee toward him. Hey, my legal team drafted up a standard prenup, I told him gently. It basically just says what's yours before the marriage stays yours, what's mine stays mine, and anything we build together after we say I do is split 50-50. Standard stuff. Spencer looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Actually, Hannah, my mom has her family lawyer drafting something too. She said it's just standard protocol for our family. I frowned. Spencer, you don't have any family money right now. You're an architect on a salary. What is there to protect? It's just for future inheritance, he said defensively. Just let her lawyer send it to yours. It's just paperwork, babe. Let's not make it a big deal. I loved him, so I agreed to let my lead attorney, Gwen, review Cynthia's version of the document. 3 days later, Gwen called me into her office. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. Hannah, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to read it to you, Gwen said, adjusting her glasses and looking at the thick stack of paper on her desk. This isn't a prenup. This is an extortion letter. What do you mean? I asked, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Gwen pointed a manicured finger at a highlighted clause on page 12. They've hidden a clause in here under spousal support and asset appreciation. It basically states that because Spencer will be providing emotional and domestic support that enables you to act as CEO, he is entitled to a massive percentage of the appreciation of Aegis Guardian's valuation from the day of the wedding forward. But that's not even the worst part. She flipped to the back of the document. There's a vesting clause. It states that upon 5 years of marriage, Spencer would automatically be granted voting rights equivalent to 30% of your shares. If you were to divorce him before the 10-year mark, you would be forced to buy him out at double the market value, essentially bankrupting you and forcing a hostile sale of your own company to pay him off. I sat in the leather chair in Gwen's office, literally speechless. The room started to spin. They were trying to steal my company. They were using my love for Spencer as a Trojan horse to infiltrate Aegis Guardian. Did Spencer read this? I choked out, my heart hammering against my ribs. His signature is on the bottom of the drafting request, Gwen said softly. I left the office seeing red. I drove straight to the construction site where Spencer was managing a project. I marched past the hard hats, my heels sinking into the dirt, and shoved the document into his chest. Did you read this? I screamed over the sound of a cement mixer. Did you actually read what your mother's lawyer wrote? Spencer looked at the papers, his face turning pale. Hannah, calm down. It's legal jargon. My mom said it was just to ensure I wasn't left with nothing if your risky tech startup went under and you dragged my credit down. My risky tech startup is worth $30 million, Spencer. I roared. This contract gives you voting rights in my boardroom. It forces me to liquidate my father's life work if we get a divorce. Did you authorize this? He shrank back, looking like a little boy caught stealing candy. I didn't read the whole thing, Hannah, I swear. My mom just handed me a summary and told me to sign it so the lawyers could start hashing it out. I trust her. She's just looking out for me. Well, you need to look out for us, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I am not signing this. Gwen is sending over my original draft. You sign mine, or there is no wedding. Your mother does not get a seat at my board table. Spencer spent the next 3 days apologizing, buying me flowers, and swearing that he had reprimanded his mother. He promised me he would sign my version of the prenup, and true to his word, a week later, Gwen received the signed, notarized copy of my standard prenup. I exhaled. I thought we had weathered the storm. I thought Spencer had finally stood up to Cynthia and chosen me. I thought the nightmare was over. But I had underestimated Cynthia's ruthlessness, and I had grossly overestimated Spencer's spine. The week of the wedding arrived. We had rented out a stunning, secluded estate in Napa Valley for the weekend. The plan was flawless. The rehearsal dinner went beautifully, though Cynthia barely spoke to me, glaring at me from across the room with a look of smug satisfaction that made my skin crawl. I ignored it. I was surrounded by my friends, my company's co-founders, and my mother, Joanna, who had flown in from Chicago. Then came the morning of the wedding. The air in the bridal suite smelled of hairspray, expensive champagne, and fresh eucalyptus. My bridesmaids were laughing, getting their makeup done, while I sat in the corner, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I missed my dad terribly in that moment. I wore a small locket with his picture inside, resting it against my collarbone. At 11 a.m., 2 hours before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, there was a sharp knock on the door. My maid of honor opened it to reveal Cynthia. She wasn't wearing her mother of the groom dress yet. She was wearing a sharp, tailored Chanel business suit, and she was holding a manila folder. Behind her stood a man I recognized from photographs, Howard, her family's corporate attorney. "I need the room," Cynthia announced, her voice echoing in the sudden silence of the suite. My bridesmaids looked at me. I nodded slowly, a deep sense of dread washing over me. "Give us a minute, guys." Once the door clicked shut, Cynthia walked over to the vanity table and dropped the folder onto the marble surface. "What is this, Cynthia?" I asked, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "A small adjustment," she said with a sickeningly sweet smile. "Howard here has drawn up a post-nuptial agreement, along with an immediate transfer of equity." "We already signed the prenup," I said, narrowing my eyes. "You signed a piece of paper that meant nothing to this family," Cynthia sneered, dropping the act completely. Her eyes were ice cold. "Spencer is the heir to our legacy. I will not have him marry a girl from a middle-class background who refuses to integrate her assets into the family trust. You've had your fun playing CEO, Hannah. But if you want to marry my son, you will sign this." I opened the folder. The legal language was dense, but the bolded header made it crystal clear. "Immediate transfer of controlling interest, 51% of Aegis Guardian LLC, to the Spencer Family Trust." "You're out of your mind," I breathed, looking up at her. "You want me to hand over 51% of my company, my father's company. You want me to give up my controlling share to you?" "To Spencer," she corrected sharply, "which is managed by the trust, which I oversee. It's the only way to ensure the business is run properly, with our family's financial backing. Consider it an acquisition." "I don't need your financial backing," I shouted, the anger finally boiling over. "My company is wildly profitable, and it will be even more profitable when my husband's connections take it over," Cynthia said calmly. She looked down at her diamond-encrusted watch. "Here is the situation, Hannah. Spencer is currently in the groom's suite. He has already signed his portion of this agreement, and he has agreed that if you do not sign it, he will not be waiting at the end of that aisle in 2 hours. The air was sucked out of the room. My chest seized. "You're lying. Spencer wouldn't do that." "Oh, sweetheart," Cynthia laughed, a dry, pitying sound. "Who do you think pays for his extravagant lifestyle? His architect's salary? Please, we subsidize his life. And I told him this morning that if he marries you without securing this asset, he will be cut off completely. No trust fund, no inheritance, nothing." He made his choice. Howard, the lawyer, stepped forward and placed a heavy silver pen on top of the documents. "You have 90 minutes, Miss Hannah," Howard said smoothly. "I suggest you read it over, sign it, and enjoy your beautiful wedding day." Cynthia turned on her heel and walked to the door. She paused, looking back at me in my white silk robe. "Don't cry, dear. It will ruin your makeup," she said, and then she shut the door, leaving me completely alone with the contract that demanded my father's legacy in exchange for my future husband. For 10 completely suffocating minutes, I sat alone in that bridal suite, staring at the contract. The crisp white paper felt heavy, like it was physically radiating a toxic energy. I read through the dense legal jargon, scanning for any sign that Cynthia had been bluffing, hoping that maybe I had misunderstood the severity of her threat. I hadn't. In fact, It was worse than she made it sound. Section 4. Subsection B detailed that not only would the Spencer Family Trust absorb a 51% controlling interest in Aegis Guardian, but Cynthia herself would be appointed as a mandatory advisory board member, holding veto power over any executive hiring or firing decisions. They weren't just stealing the equity, they were putting a leash on me. They wanted me to build the wealth while they pulled the strings from their country club dining room. A heavy knock on the door broke my concentration. My maid of honor, Olivia, poked her head in, her face pale. "Hannah? Your mom wants to know if you're ready to get in the dress." "It's almost time," Olivia said softly, her eyes darting to the contract on the table. "Is everything okay?" Cynthia looked like the cat that ate the canary when she walked out. "Olivia, stay here. Do not let anyone in," I ordered, my voice eerily calm. The tears I had been fighting back had entirely evaporated. The heartbreak was still there, a hollow ache in my chest, but it was being rapidly overshadowed by a cold, calculating fury. I was a CEO. I handled hostile takeovers for breakfast. I bypassed the bridesmaids, hiking up the silk of my robe, and marched down the long corridor of the Napa estate toward the groom's suite. I didn't care about the superstition of the groom seeing the bride before the ceremony. The wedding was already bleeding out on the floor. I needed to know who was holding the knife. I threw open the heavy oak door without knocking. Spencer was standing by the window, a glass of amber whiskey trembling in his hand. His best man, Benjamin, was adjusting his bow tie in the mirror. They both froze. "Hannah!" Spencer gasped, nearly dropping his glass. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be. Did you sign it?" I cut him off, my voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. Benjamin took one look at my face, raised his hands in surrender, and slipped out of the room, closing the door quietly behind him. We were alone. Spencer refused to meet my eyes. He stared at the floor, the ice clinking nervously in his glass. "Hannah, please, just let the lawyers handle it on Monday. Today is about us." "Do not lie to me, Spencer." I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Your mother just walked into my room with a corporate attorney and a contract demanding 51% of Aegis Guardian. She said you already signed your portion. She said if I don't sign it, you won't be at the altar." Spencer set the glass down on a side table and rubbed his temples. "You have to understand, Hannah. My parents, they cornered me. My dad said if I marry you with the original prenup, I'm entirely cut out of the family trust. No inheritance, no safety net. The money they were going to use to buy us that house in Aspen? Gone. They said they need to protect the family's interests. By stealing my times interests? I demanded, appalled. "Spencer, it's my dad's company. It's everything I've built, and you agreed to let them take it?" "It's just on paper," he pleaded, finally looking at me. His eyes were wide and desperate. "You'll still run the day-to-day. You'll still be the face of the company. We just share the equity with the trust." With their network, Aegis Guardian could double in size. "It's a smart business move, babe. Just sign it. Once we are married, we can figure the rest out." I stared at the man I had loved for 3 years, the man I thought was my partner, my equal. The illusion shattered completely. He wasn't a partner, he was a dependent. He was so terrified of losing his parents' allowance that he was willing to serve me up on a silver platter to appease them. "You're a coward," I whispered. Spencer flinched. "Hannah, don't do this. Don't throw away our wedding over pride." "It's not pride, Spencer. It's self-respect. And it's my father's legacy." I turned my back on him, my hand resting on the brass doorknob. "I'll see you out there." "You're going to sign it?" he asked, a pathetic wave of relief washing over his voice. I didn't answer him. I walked out of the room, my mind entirely made up. When I returned to my suite, my mother, Joanna, was waiting. She saw the look in my eye, the same look my father used to get when a server crashed, and he had to rebuild the system from scratch. "What happened?" my mom asked, taking my hands. I told her everything. I told her about the contract, about Cynthia's ambush, and about Spencer's betrayal. My mother, a fierce woman who had held our family together through unimaginable grief, turned a shade of deep, furious red. "Take that robe off," Joanna commanded, reaching for my duffel bag. "We are packing up. I will go out there and announce that the wedding is off." "No," I stopped her, a sharp, humorless smile touching my lips. No, Mom. If we just leave, Cynthia will spin the narrative. She'll tell all 200 of those influential guests that the poor, overwhelmed startup girl couldn't handle the pressure and left her son at the altar. She'll control the story, and she might even try to sue me for breach of contract on the venue. Then what are you going to do? Olivia asked, wide-eyed. I walked over to the garment bag hanging in the corner. I'm going to put on my dress, and I'm going to handle this like a CEO. The string quartet was playing a flawless rendition of Pachelbel's canon in D. The late afternoon sun was setting over the Napa vineyards, casting a golden, cinematic glow over the rows of white folding chairs. 200 guests rose to their feet as I turned the corner and began my walk down the aisle. I looked breathtaking, and I knew it. The custom Vera Wang gown fit me like a glove, the delicate lace trailing behind me on the manicured grass. I held my head high, making direct eye contact with the crowd. In the front row, Cynthia was positively glowing. She was wearing a dress that was entirely too close to white, a smug, victorious smile plastered across her face. She looked at me not like a new daughter, but like an acquisition she had successfully closed. Next to her sat Howard the lawyer, holding a leather briefcase. At the altar, Spencer looked incredibly relieved. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead and smiled at me, clearly convinced that my presence meant I had surrendered. I reached the end of the aisle. I didn't hand my bouquet to Olivia. I didn't turn to face Spencer. Instead, I bypassed him entirely and stepped directly up to the officiant, a lovely older man named Sullivan. "Excuse me, Sullivan," I said softly, reaching toward the lapel of his suit. "May I borrow your microphone?" Sullivan looked confused, but unclipped the small, wireless microphone and handed it to me. I stood in my custom Vera Wang gown, the microphone cold in my trembling hand. 200 guests stared in dead silence. My mother-in-law had just ambushed me with a contract demanding 51% of my life's work. I looked at my fiancé, took a breath, and said the words that would change my life forever. "Thank you all for being here today." My voice echoed crystal clear across the silent vineyard. "It is a beautiful evening, and this is a stunning venue. However, there will be no vows exchanged today." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Spencer stepped forward, his face draining of blood. "Hannah, what are you doing?" he hissed. I ignored him, my eyes locking directly onto Cynthia in the front row. Her smug smile had instantly vanished, replaced by a look of sheer panic. An hour ago, I continued into the mic. My future mother-in-law, Cynthia, accompanied by her legal counsel, entered my private bridal suite. She informed me that if I did not sign over 51% of my cybersecurity company, a company I built from the ground up to honor my late father, her son would not marry me. The murmurs in the crowd erupted into shocked whispers. I saw several of Cynthia's wealthy business associates turning to look at her in utter disgust. "She called it an acquisition," I said, my voice steady, ringing with absolute authority. "She told me that my middle-class background wasn't sufficient, and that the only way into this family was to surrender my controlling interest to their trust fund." I finally turned to look at Spencer. He was frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "And my fiancé," I said, the heartbreak finally bleeding into my tone. Knowing this, signed his end of the extortion paperwork and waited here for me to cave. "But I am my father's daughter. I don't negotiate with terrorists, and I certainly don't marry cowards." I turned back to the crowd. "Please enjoy the open bar and the catered dinner. It has been fully paid for by my risky tech startup. But as for the ceremony," I looked dead at Cynthia, offering her the exact same tight, venomous smile she had given me for 3 years. "Wedding cancelled." I didn't drop the mic that would have damaged the audio equipment I paid to rent. I politely handed it back to a stunned Sullivan. I turned around and walked back down the aisle. The string quartet was silent. The only sound was the rustle of my heavy silk gown against the grass. My mother and Olivia immediately stepped out of their rows and followed closely behind me, acting as my personal security detail. We didn't look back. We walked straight to the waiting bridal limousine. I climbed inside, popped the cork on a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon that was waiting in the ice bucket, and took a long, glorious drink straight from the bottle. I had lost a fiancé that day, but I had saved my company, my father's legacy, and my own soul. And as the limo drove away from the vineyard, leaving Spencer and Cynthia to face the wrath of 200 bewildered guests, I had never felt more powerful in my entire life. Thank you so much for reading my story. If this narrative resonated with you, or if you've ever had to stand your absolute ground against toxic in-laws, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life drama. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update, and let me know in the comments below what you would have done in my shoes. Stay strong, and never compromise your worth.